Good evening, my name is Aeon, and welcome to this game touch of Xenus, Boiling Point Road to Hell. First-person RPG developed by Deep Shadows, which is in a Ukrainian studio, and it was published by Atari back in 2005. As many of you well know, games journalist Kieran Gillian, founder of the New Games Journalist movement and writer at Rock Paper Shotgun, recently retired and placed essentially a goatee of his best work up on Rock Paper Shotgun. And what struck me of all his reviews was his review of this game, which I figured I'd give a try. So this is a little look at Xenus 2. It was published by it was reviewed by Kieran Gillian to both a 9, a 3, and an 8 out of 10 in true Gamecrux style. Now, if you ever played Far Cry 2, it's quite similar to that. You've got a lot of driving, you've got a big world with all these open elements. It's set in about modern day and sort of a poverty-stricken world. Here I am shooting up some civilians, and you can see some of the problems the game has. For example, the civilians don't seem to care that I shoot one another. In fact, they don't really even seem to care that I'm shooting at them. That man certainly just took a bullet and didn't really care. Here I'm at a gas station where you can repair your car and purchase more fuel because your car's run out of fuel. And as you can see, my car had the headlights left on, so I was actually consuming fuel because the engine was on, even though I'd parked my car. So the game has lots of really cool, like sort of minutia RPG elements, which really help to tie you into the world. I just shot up an arms dealer who's got this like little hidden base that I found earlier in this garage. One of my frustrations with the game is that I can shoot up this arms dealer, yeah, it gives me that freedom. However, it doesn't allow me to take advantage of that freedom. He doesn't drop anything. So, it's sort of like you can shoot the arms dealer, but there's no point to it. So the freedom it gives you to like interrupt these systems sort of feels false in a lot of ways. I just crashed into a car because that's what I do. You can see I've got 4% fuel and 63% car status, I guess. I'm stopping at this roadblock, and this man will actually call out to me. He'll need my identification papers. I'll say, hey, I'm a friend, and then it'll check my in-game reputation with government troops. This is a government checkpoint because the country's in the grip of communist revolt and in the grip of a mafia mafia uprising, essentially. Here's a car dealership over here. I'm just going to show off. There's an inventory. It's got full RPG thing. There's an upgrade system where you can throw sub-objects into objects to improve your guns and stuff. So that's all very complex. It's got this full mission interface. Someone just rammed into my car. Just like in GTA, people are awful drivers in this game, much like I was earlier. So I'm just going to wait till he goes by and hang behind this sign just to show some more of the RPG elements in this game. There's all these missions. You've got this search for Lisa, who's your daughter. That's essentially the MacGuffin of the plot. As you're going, you've got all these known characters, and you can click on these known characters to get waypoints on your map. Now, this map is huge. That doesn't give you a scale. Like, you zoom in over individual parts of the map, and the map is, in fact, really, really hard to use, but it's crazy. There's all of this character stuff. There's proficiencies, what kind of stuff you can drive. There's your relationship to different factions. I'm an enemy to civilians because I've got I just shot 3 of them at the gas station. There's also different proficiencies in weapons and such, which is based on usage. So that's all pretty damn cool. As you can see up in the top right, there's damage based on location, Deus Ex style. That's pretty rock and car, so I'm going to say hi to him. You talk with the F1 keys, which is really awkward. And also, some of the F1 keys like overrule other types of buttons normally, so it's all sort of really awkward. Also, some of the dialogue is voiced, some of it isn't, and all of the dialogue that is voiced, you really wish wasn't voiced. The game has appalling voice acting even worse than its acting, although at least it's just bad voice acting as compared to previous Game Touch of Gothic 4, which was really just offensive voice acting. It was just that bad. So I'm just cycling through this guy's dialogue tree and trying to get the price of something. As you can see, I'm sort of not doing it right because only in this Game Touch did I manage to figure out that if you hit the arrow keys, then you can actually move up and down in dialogue options. Because you can see in this menu, there's no actual option for goodbye. You have to bash down on it a whole bunch of times until you get that. And I couldn't ask how much the vintage car was anyway, because that would have stopped for us recording, which is obviously not the ideal. So we leave this guy behind. I try to jack the car, and it goes, "No go, amigo," up in the corner, because I don't have the keys, I guess. I have seen that sign a couple of times. I have to assume it is because I don't have the keys. I actually just stole this car earlier before I started commentating, so yeah, so there's obviously a bit of Grand Theft Auto. I'm going to drive into the starting town here. We've got this nice little monument. I crash into a wall because the driving model is really hard in this game. First off, I'm going to kill my voice for a second, and just hopefully, if I remember. And you can listen to this audio, which is of the car, which is really bad. My fraps recording is slightly wrong, so it's worse than it should be. It's sort of distorted, but it's really, really distorted even on a pretty low volume on my standard setup, so there's some problem there. As you can see from my crashing, it's really hard to drive anywhere. That doesn't mean the driving model is complicated. It's an incredibly simplistic driving model, but at the same time, it doesn't feel very good at all. I'm actually out of fuel, but apparently I can still drive. You can't, like in Far Cry, you don't have mouse look that is independent from where you're driving, so you can't say drive forward and then mouse look off to the left, like sort of look at the majesty of the environment or anything. This guy just gets stuck into the wall because that's what a glitchy game Xenus is. The game is mad glitchy, but that's sort of satisfying in a strange way. Yeah, so you can't like look at the environment anywhere. If you try to move the mouse to look around, then it just actually steers the car. So that means like finding side roads is next to impossible because you often just can't physically see them because your field of view is so narrow. Also, it means you can't appreciate the majestic open world that is the Xenus. Because when you're in Bolivia, when you're in the Riviera, and you're driving for 5 minutes on end, you want to be able to look around. You want to be able to marvel at the scenery. And as it is with the restrictive driving look, you can only see the scenery if it's directly in front of you, which is a real problem. It severely hampers my enjoyment of the game. Aside from the game just being awfully like sort of buggy, as I've shown, it's got this like really awful AI. It's got a really cool sort of grim subject matter with all the there's Indians. I'm not sure whether Indians is the politically correct term for natives of South America. There we go. The car's out of anything. So I try to turn it on here. You'll see the headlights flicker on. No, I already did, and then it doesn't work. So I'll wander around trying to find a car. As you can see, it shows me where I left all my vehicles, but it's pretty far out of town, so I'm not going to walk all that way to try to get it. And over here is the government camp, and I've set up waypoints. You know, it's got some basic functionality, but the map is annoyingly hard to use. Yeah, so it's got the plot involves racism. It involves the struggle of communists against an oppressive government. It involves slavery on behalf of the mafia. It's pretty grim subject matter, and that's contrasted with the main character, who I think has the name of Sol Myers, who essentially just is a collection of the worst one-liners you can possibly imagine. Worst. Oh Jesus! Actually, I take a fair bit of damage there. I didn't even realize. So he's got these awful one-liners which are awfully voice acted, which is really quite poor. In this town, you can do an awful lot. The game has an awful lot of systems. For example, this town has hotels, it has hospitals, it has a church, evidently. It's got banks. It's just filled with stuff to do. It's got fruit markets. If you want to go visit a fruit market, it's got that bar where I picked up missions. So the game has lots of intricate, like sort of RPG elements to it, which give the world all these feelings of depth. But it's a very different depth to, say, Far Cry 2, where there's like a lot of depth in the systems of the world. In here, there isn't very much depth in systems of the world. The AI is incredibly simplistic, and the only cases where the AI seems more than just sort of Doom level is when the AI has to deal with sort of factional relationships, which it does occasionally, and you can get into some sort of odd crossfires. Here I'm using a taxi for fast travel, this is sort of nice. So when it gets into like these sort of multi-layered fights, you can get a little bit of emergence, but by and large, the game is actually quite predictable despite all the systems interlocking, as opposed to Far Cry 2, which has only has divergence in its combat, in its AI, in its sort of natural environment with like the propagation of fire, the wind and such. But they result in a lot more unexpected situations than the, to be perfectly honest, somewhat deeper traditional gameplay mechanics of Xenus to Far Cry 2. However, they don't they're never as satisfying. They result in fairly predictable outcomes, like sort of, yeah. And as you'll see, you might see in a bit. I'm not sure how long I'm going to let this Gametouch run for, but if I let it run for about another minute, then you can see the combat in the game, which doesn't have a lot going for it. In fact, this Gametouch is run over time, so yeah, combat, appalling. That's all I'm going to say. Animations, appalling. I hope this doesn't run over time for YouTube's timer. This has been Aeon Gametouch for Gamecrux, gamecrux.com. Enjoy. Have a nice day.